Welcome to Dear Fans. It was a cold evening in New York City, December. The streets of Manhattan buzzed with holiday cheer, but for 14-year-old twins Ryan and Lily Parker, this season brought little comfort. They had been homeless for 2 years, struggling to survive after their parents passed away in a car accident. Tonight, they clutched a tattered notebook in their hands, their last shred of hope tied to an impossible dream. Caitlin Clark, are you serious? Ryan whispered to Lily as they stood outside a crowded theater. I don't care if it's crazy, Lily replied, her voice trembling. We've come this far, haven't we? Caitlin was in town for a charity event. The twins had saved every penny from odd jobs and scavenging to get bus tickets from Boston to Manhattan just for this moment. They had heard stories about Caitlin's kindness, her humility, her generosity, but nothing could prepare them for what was about to happen. As the star exited the theater, surrounded by cameras and cheering fans, Ryan and Lily pushed through the chaos. A security guard stepped in front of them. But Li's desperate voice broke through the noise. Clark, please, we need to tell you something. It's about our father. The words stopped Caitlin, and her tracks, her sharp eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on the shivering twins, her brow furrowed with concern. She gestured for security to let them through. What's going on? She asked, kneeling to meet their eyes. Ryan could barely speak. Lily's hands trembled as she held out the notebook. Our dad used to talk about you, she said, her voice breaking. He said you were his best friend in college. Caitlin's breath hitched. What he told us, stories about how you inspired him to chase his dreams. Lily continued, how you were there for him when no one else was. Caitlin hesitated, then reached for the notebook. Her hands shook as she flipped it open. Pages filled with handwritten letters, memories, thought sketches, and then at the top of every page a named David Parker. Caitlin's face paled. I remember David, her voice cracked. The twins saw tears forming in her eyes, but before they could explain further, something in the notebook made Caitlin's breath hitch. She turned a page and froze. This is my handwriting. Her fingers traced a note, scrolled in the margin, a note she had written. How Lily nodded, her tears flowing freely. Now, he said, you used to write to him too, or voice wavered. This notebook, it was the only thing he kept with him, no matter what. Caitlin's grip on the notebook tightened. She closed her eyes, clutching it to her chest. Then she looked at the twins. Her voice was barely a whisper. What happened to him? Whereas David Thankyou exchanged a pained glance. Ryan swallowed hard. He died in the same accident that left us homeless. Caitlin's face crumpled. She pulled the twins into an embrace, ignoring the cameras, ignoring the crowd. The world faded away. All that mattered now was the story these twins carried and the bond they had just forged. Caitlin's voice wasted with emotion. What can I do? Tell me everything. And so the twins began to speak about their father, their struggles, their dreams, their pain. But they didn't know. No, Caitlin had already made up her mind. She wasn't going to let them go back into the cold. Not tonight, not ever. Snow began to fall as they sat on the steps of the theater. Caitlin pulled off her scarf, wrapping it around Lily, who was visibly shaking, though it wasn't clear if it was from the cold or the weight of their words. Ryan sat quietly, his hands clenched into fists as he fought back tears. Caitlin's voice was soft but intense. You've been living on the streets for 2 years at your age. Ryan finally spoke. His voice was raw with pain. We didn't have a choice. He paused. After the accident, no one wanted to take us in the system. His lips trembled. They tried to split us up, send us to different homes. He inhaled sharply. We couldn't let that happen. Dad wouldn't have wanted that. Caitlin nodded slowly. Your father would have fought like hell to keep you together. I know he would have. She swallowed hard. Her thoughts drifted back to her own struggles, to the people who had helped her when she needed it most. The notebook sat on her lap. She flipped through the pages until she found them. Sketches, rough drawings of us younger Caitlin and David, smiling carefree. She twrw the lines with her finger. David, she could still hear his laugh, still remember the way he talked about his future, still remember he always believed in me. She murmured, even when I didn't believe in myself. Lily wiped her eyes. He said you were like a sister to him. Her voice was barely above a whisper. That's why he named Ryan after you. Caitlin's head snapped up. What? Ryan swallowed. Dad said he wanted us to carry a piece of you. His voice broke. To remember the kind of person we should be. For a moment Caitlin couldn't speak. Snow fell heavier now, muffling the sounds of the city around them. Finally Caitlin whispered, your dad was one of the best people I've ever known. She met their eyes. He deserved better. Her voice grew stronger. And so do you. Lily hesitated, then reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a crumpled photograph, handed it to Caitlin with trembling hands. This was the last picture we took together before her voice broke. Caitlin stared at the photograph, her vision blurred with tears. An old faded Polaroid. David, the twins, their faces lit with joy in the Background day college campus. She remembered vividly Caitlin's breath caught, that was the day he told me he was going to be a dad. She swallowed. He was terrified a tear slipped down her cheek. But he was so happy. Lily sobbed. We've lost everything, our home, our family. Her voice shook. All we wanted was to find you, to tell you that he loved you so much. Caitlin wrapped an arm around her, gripped Ryan's shoulder. Her voice was steady, unbreakable. You don't have to tell me anymore. She inhaled deeply. From now on, you're not alone. Caitlin sat there for a moment, holding them close, the cold of the winter air forgotten for the first time in years. Ryan and Lily felt something stir within them, hope, but they had no idea just how much their lives were about to change or how deeply this bond with Caitlin would reshape all of their futures. The snow thick and the street lights cast a soft glow, making the moment feel almost unreal. People around them had stopped to watch, sensing that something bigger was happening, but for Ryan, Lily, and Caitlin, the world had faded away, only their pain. Their memories, their newfound connection remained. Caitlin exhaled slowly. Then she stood, pulling the twins gently to their feet. Come with me. Her voice was steady, but kind. You've been through enough. Let's get you somewhere warm. Ryan hesitated. We don't want to be a burden. Lily clutched the notebook tighter, as if letting go of it would erase everything. We just wanted to meet you, to tell you about Dad. Caitlin knelt down again, looking them straight in the eyes. You could never be a burden, KN2. Me. Her voice was firm. Your dad was my family. Pause. She reached out and took Lily's trembling hands. And now so are you. The twins exchanged a glance, disbelief, fear, vulnerability. No one had ever spoken to them like that, not since their parents died. It was as if someone had reached into the cold, dark void they had been trapped in and lit a small, flickering flame. Caitlin hailed a cab, pulled a few crumpled bills from her pocket to pay for the ride. They climbed inside, the warmth of the car wrapped around them like a blanket. The driver glanced at then through the rear-view mirror, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Caitlin gave him the address of a modest hotel nearby. She didn't want to overwhelm the twins with anything too extravagant. Not yet. The ride was silent except for the sounds of the city outside. Lily leaned against Ryan, her exhaustion finally catching up to her. Sign noticed the way her fingers clung to the notebook, as if letting it go would make her father's memory disappear. When they arrived at the hotel, Caitlin helped them out of the cab, ushered them inside. Book day room for the night, ignoring the curious stares of the receptionist. Once they were settled, she ordered food, real food, not the scraps or instant noodles the twins had grown used to. As they ate, Caitlin sat across from them, elbows resting on the table, face filled with quiet determination. I want to hear everything. Her voice was gentle. Everything about your dad, about what you've been through. She met Ryan's eyes. Don't leave anything out. Ryan set his fork down, his appetite fading. He inhaled sharply, prepared to relive the nightmare after the accident. No one seemed to care. His voice was flat but laced with bitterness. They said they'd help, but all they did was push us into the system of pauses. Fists clenched. Lily and I made a P, no matter what, we'd stick together. His voice cracked. We ran away from the foster home they sent us. His jaw tightened. They tried to separate us. Lily wiped her mouth with a napkin, her hands shaking. We've been on the streets ever since. She lowered her head. We did everything we could to survive, but her voice broke. It's been so hard. She looked down at her plate, ashamed. Caitlin reached across the table, placed her hand over Lily. You don't have to be ashamed. Her voice was firm. You did what you had to do. She squeezed Lily's hand. You're brave. She looked at Ryan. Both of you. Her voice softened. And your dad, he would be so proud. The twins broke down, then the weight of their grief crashing over them. See, Caitlin moved to their side, held them as they cried. For a moment it felt like the pain might never end, but Caitlin knew better than anyone. Even the deepest wounds could heal with time, with love. That night, after the twins had fallen asleep in the hotel room, Caitlin sat by the window staring out at the city. The notebook lay open in her lap, the pages filled with David's thoughts, as dreams, as sketches. And then a particular entry caught her eye. She read it once, then again, her heart pounding. If anything ever happens to me, I want Caitlin to know how much she meant to me. And I hope she'll look out for my kids. They're my everything. Caitlin's hands tightened around the notebook. Her throat burned, her vision blurred with unshed tears. She closed the notebook, exhaled shakily, her jaw set. She wasn't going to let David down, not again. The next morning, she made a phone call. It was time to take the next step, to give Ryan and Lily the life they deserved. She didn't know how the world would react or how her own life might change, but she didn't care. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had a purpose again. The morning light crept into the hotel room. Ryan and Lily were still asleep, huddled together like they had done every night on the streets. Caitlin sat by the window, the Notebook still in her hands, David's words echoing in her mind. She hadn't slept, but she didn't feel tired. Instead, she felt something else, a deep, unshakable resolve. When the twins woke up, Caitlin greeted them with warm bagels and hot sea cocoa. Their wide eyes lit up with gratitude, but it was clear they were still wary. They had been let down too many times before. Caitlin broke the silence. Listen, her voice was gentle. I've been thinking a lot about what to do next. To pause. And I know this might sound overwhelming, but I want you to trust me. She met Ryan's gaze. I'm going to help you. She took a breath. Not just for today, a pause, or tomorrow. Her voice softened. For as long as you need me. Ryan set his cup down, his brow furrowed. Why would you do that? He shook his head. You barely know us. Caitlin leaned forward, her voice steady, filled with emotion. Because your dad was my family. A pause, and family doesn't abandon each other. Her voice softened. No matter what. Ryan stared at Caitlin, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, neither twins spoke. They had spent years surviving on their own, years learning not to trust. But Caitlin's words, they cut through the fear, the doubt, the walls they had built to protect themselves. Lily's voice was barely a whisper. But we're just nudie. Swallowed hard. How can we even begin to fit into your life? Caitlin reached out, placed a hand over Lily. You're not nobodies. Her voice was steadier. David's kids. At pause. And that makes you extraordinary. Tears welled in Lily's eyes, but before she could responded, Caitlin stood. She had already made up her mind. She wasn't going to let them go back to the streets. Not now, not ever. That day, Caitlin made a series of quiet, deliberate moves. She contacted a lawyer to begin the process of becoming their legal guardian. She reached out to friends to find the best therapists to help the twins heal from their trauma. She even spoke to a small private school, a nurturing place where the twins could enroll without judgment. But she quickly realized helping Ryan and Lily wasn't just about logistics. It was about rebuilding their sense of trust, their belief that they deserved love, that they mattered, that they weren't alone. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and slowly something remarkable happened. Ryan and Lily began to heal. Lily rediscover her love for art. She painted vivid images of the family she lost but still carried in her heart. Ryan, who had always been fiercely protective of his sister, began to open up, to trust, to laugh again. And Caitlin, she found something, to a purpose, a reason to keep moving forward. A family. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace in Caitlin's home, no longer strangers, but something closer to family, Ryan turned to Caitlin. His voice was hesitant, but there was something in his eyes, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Hope. Do you think Dad would be proud of us? Caitlin's throat tightened, her voice cracked as she replied, proud doesn't even begin to cover it. She looked between the twins. He'd be amazed. A pause, her voice softened. He'd see the best parts of himself in both of Oli. Wiped a tear from her cheek, or voice was barely above a whisper. I miss him so much. Caitlin wrapped an arm around her, pulled her close. I know, kiddo. Her voice trembled. I miss him too. She exhaled, but he's still here. A pause. She placed a hand over Lily's heart. In you, then over Ryan's. In you, a shaky breath. And in every memory we hold on to. Months passed, the seasons changed, and one day Caitlin brought the twins somewhere new, a quiet cemetery. They stood before a simple, unmarked grave. Lily and Ryan knelt, placing fresh flowers against the cold stone. Lily traced the letters of their father's name, whispered, we found her dad. Her voice broke. We found Caitlin. Ryan swallowed hard. His voice was hoarse. And we're okay now. A pause. We promise. Caitlin stood beside them, her heart heavy but full. Ly looked up at her, tears shining in her eyes. Thank you. Her voice trembled. For everything, for not giving up on us. Caitlin knelt beside her, placed a hand on her shoulder. Her own eyes glistened with emotion. You gave me a gift. To Lily, a pause. You brought me back to your dad. A shaky breath. And you reminded me what really matters. Ryan gently placed the flowers down, then whispered, we'll make you proud. Data. Pause's voice with steady, we pray, promise. The snow began to fall, soft, gentle. Lily reached for Caitlin's hand, Ryan too, and together they stood there, not as broken souls, not as lost children, but as something else, as a family. And though their story was far from over, one thing was certain. It was a story of love, of resilience, and of the extraordinary power of human kindness. Like this video and subscribe this channel. Thank you.